Center for the Study of World Religions, Harvard Divinity School.
Good evening, everyone. It's a delight to welcome you to the Center for the Study of World Religions. My name is Charles Stang. I have the great privilege of serving as the director here, and I have the great honor of following in the footsteps of my colleague, Frank Clooney, whom I will invite to the podium shortly to introduce our speaker, our annual lecturer in the Hindu View of Life series, Professor Gavin Flood from Oxford University. I trust, Frank, that you will say something about the origin of this lecture series, but perhaps you may not claim credit for it, so I'll make that clear now. This wonderful series owes to the generosity of Akhil Gupta, who Frank knows, and who generously endowed this lecture series that's been running for 6-7 years? At least, no, longer than that, because 10 years. Since I have been at the helm of the center for this past 7 years, I have always consulted with Frank and more recently with Swayam, my colleagues in Hindu studies, as to who we should invite. And this year they suggested Professor Gavin Flood. I was delighted at this suggestion because in 2004, a book by Professor Flood appeared called The Ascetic Self. This came out just as I was beginning to dissertate. And I was working in the field of early Christianity and thinking about how apophatic theology was a form of asceticism, that is to say, a form of transforming the self. And I found that book enormously helpful. So I know I'm not the only person in this room for whom your books have been catalytic and transformative. So it's a delight to finally meet you, an honor to have you here as the Hindu View of Life lecturer. And without further ado, I'll invite my colleague Frank Clooney to introduce Professor Flood.
Thank you, Charlie. So as Charlie was saying, we are indebted to the generosity of Akhil Gupta, who spent a year in the Advanced Leadership program here at Harvard and became aware of the need for a lecture series like this. And so he came up with the name Hindu View of Life Lecture, echoing a book by Dr. Radhakrishnan about the Hindu View of Life. And he was the opening speaker when the center opened in 1960. So it was nice to have the echo of Radhakrishnan, his work, and the founding of the center. The Shiva Nataraj back there over in the back is a gift from Dr. Radhakrishnan. So I think, although his name is not in the lecture series, he's very much in the spirit of how we are today in this event. I think it does go back about 10 years. The first speakers included Vasudha Narayan and Arvind Sharma. And we've had a number of very interesting scholars coming through in the years. So it's a distinguished series, but no one more distinguished than our speaker tonight. So we're definitely happy to have Gavin Flood here, who I've had the honor and pleasure of knowing for some 20 years now. I think we go way back. I was much younger then. I don't know about you, but 20 years ago. Yes. And I will not read you his entire CV, the 30 pages of it, but just to point out some highlights of it about what a privilege it is to have such a great scholar in our midst. In terms of appointments, he is currently the Piramal Dean of Academic Affairs at the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies, the center that was founded about 25 years ago now. I served briefly as an academic director, 3 years, and then after I left, Gavin came in, and no one knew that it would be more than 20 years. He would still be the academic director, doing brilliant work in developing the center and making it all come to life and flourish in many different ways. As the Piramal Dean of Academic Affairs, he's in charge of the academic programming, oversees, I think, many of the continuing education programs, the many visitors that come in from around the world, the publication series, and so on. So we don't even know how he had time to come here for this lecture today, but he certainly is a busy man at Oxford. He's also a senior research fellow at Campion Hall, the Jesuit community, the hall about 100 years old now, in the Oxford neighborhood down the street from Christchurch. And he's an esteemed senior scholar there, and it's a perfect fit, I think. Good for the Jesuits and good for Gavin to be in the same space together. He is a professor of Hindu studies and comparative religion at Oxford University, so has achieved a kind of status there and has been recognized by the university and honored in various ways. In 2009, he was awarded the Oxford University Title of Distinction, Professor of Hindu Studies and Comparative Religion. And in the middle of it, in 2016 to 19, he had a time as a visiting professor of comparative religious studies in Singapore at the Yale NUS University campus there, and then came back to Oxford from there. He's also taught at the University of Virginia, in Stirling and Lampeter and other university campuses in the UK, and has come and gone. He gave a lecture in this room about 12 years ago, or 15 years ago, something like that. So when Anne Monius and I had a series of speakers in, Gavin was one of our favorite speakers in that series. I'll mention a few of his publications, not simply to alert us that he has lots of publications, but rather to show the diversity of his work. So one of the early books, Introduction to Hinduism, 1996, is a go-to book if you're looking for a larger substantive introduction to Hinduism. That is a book that many of us go to, either using it in class or referring students to chapters of it and so on. It still works, and it's still a brilliant book, and it's come out in, it looks like in Spanish, in Korean, in Polish, and Chinese translation either is out or is about to come out. He edited, and this was our first academic contact, the Blackwell Companion to Hinduism, 2003. And I was honored to write a chapter in that volume. But that was our first kind of academic correspondence with one another. And a second edition of that has come out since then. He has a book from 2006, which will echo in tonight's theme, The Tantric Body, which shows the long draw of his work related to Tantra. A translation of the Bhagavad Gita in 2012. He also, just to keep going a little bit further, a book that's a favorite of mine, The Truth Within, A Comparative History of Inwardness in Christianity, Hinduism, and Buddhism, giving lots of information and cutting-edge research, but also thinking about what is this within? What are we talking about? What is the inner self, the inner reality? And doing it brilliantly, as Gavin does in all his work, erudition, clarity, exactness, and then thinking about the deeper themes involved. And that book, I think, shows that very well. 2019, Religion and the Philosophy of Life. The edited volume from Oxford again, Oxford History of Hinduism, Hindu Practice. And you'll hear from the lecturer, Gavin is certainly very alert to practice as an implication of the kind of ideas that you see in Hindu traditions. 2025, just out, Tantric Knowledge, Philosophy, History, Practice, and also out or about to come out, The Concept of Mind in Hindu Tantra. So a range of volumes, but the voice of Gavin Flood, I think, is present throughout all of them as a very thoughtful speaker. And I'll conclude just by reading a little bit from his profile, of all places, at the Campion Hall website, where you get a nice capsulization of him. And Gavin writes there, it seems to be in first person, probably you wrote it yourself, "My life's work has been to understand religion and human life, its importance in the longue durée of civilizations, and ways in which religion bestows meaning and significance to us." And so he works, he says, in 3 areas to show that long history of meaning. History of Tantric text in medieval India, we'll hear more of that tonight. Philological and textual work, and through that work, building general models of person and society. Phenomenology, number 2. If phenomenology is letting be seen that which shows itself, echoing Heidegger, then the phenomenology of religions is a kind of showing. And so he's writing a book right now, Naming Invisible Light, A History and Phenomenology of Holiness. And then thirdly, comparative religion, where his name is also very well known, discerning parallel processes across histories of civilizations, China, India, Middle East, and Europe, medieval Europe is included. And he says, I have examined bigger patterns of religions and personal life in Religion and Philosophy of Life and the Truth Within. And then he concludes, and I'll conclude with this, I am optimistic that religions are not all bad news. And so on that happy note, we'll have the good news of hearing Gavin Flood tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Frank, and thank you, Charles, for wonderful and embarrassing introductions. I'm delighted, and thank you all for coming. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. I think it was 15 years ago in this very room that I was here last time. I was probably talking about the same topic, I can't remember now, but things have moved on slightly since then. So today I'm going to speak, the title is Beneath the Texts, Tantric Views of Person, Community and the Sacred. There's a handout which you can take away and you can check the Sanskrit and all that afterwards. Oh, we got that wrong and all the rest of it. So do take a handout. So I'm going to just more or less read my lecture. So I suspect when I spoke all those years ago, it may have been on a similar theme as the questions that I've been interested in over the years about how we understand traditions. I'm going to speak about how we understand religiously motivated people through history and in traditions which are still resonant to me and to the human sciences generally. So I was probably just beginning more focused work on a tantric scripture called the Netra Tantra, the scripture of the eye, when I was last here. And that work has developed. And I'll be using illustrations from it in this lecture. So the problem I primarily wish to address today is the relation between the scripture and the society that produced it. What's that relationship? What can we glean of people's lives from such texts, of their hopes and fears, and how they position themselves within the cosmos, or more technically, what their models of the human are? What's their anthropology implicit in these texts? What's the implicit anthropology of our text? If that is primarily a descriptive task, paying attention to the self-representation of these works, then a second question is about what lies beneath the words. Are there deeper patterns at work that form and structure the views presented? So that second level questioning I'm interested in as well. So I think that there are, and that we can expose these deeper patterns, expose what we might call a cultural ontology, to coin a phrase, that enables us to see the continuities of traditions or transmissions through time and their continuity into the present, and what this pattern of tradition implies for our contemporary questions about human transformation, such as the transcendence and transformation research focus here in the Divinity School, which I was very interested to read about. So, what is this tantric view of life of my title, echoing Radhakrishnan's Hindu view of life? What is this tantric view of life? As I'm sure you know, tantric traditions are traditions focused on a new revelation at the time that called itself Tantra, which arose from around the 7th century, or a little earlier, and developed throughout South Asia and Southeast Asia, and in its Buddhist form into Tibet and further into China and Japan. Alexis Sanderson, the great scholar of these traditions, has called the period from the 7th to the 13th centuries the Shiva age. And we might even call this the Tantric age. These new texts, the Tantras, came out of ascetic traditions, ascetics leading lives of what we might call tight as opposed to loose asceticism. There's an interesting journal, Common Knowledge, published from Duke, coming out. They've got a theme on tight and loose asceticism imminently, I think. So I got that from there, Pearls, Jonathan Pearls, I think he's the guy that coined that phrase. So, this tight and loose asceticism, sometimes these characters were tight ascetics, sometimes on the edges of society, in cremation grounds, seeking salvation, seeking a salvific goal. An ascetic group called the Pashupatas saw itself as going beyond the mainstream orthodox Vedic tradition. In Hinduism, you've got this Vedic orthodox tradition, and they were going against that, or they were transcending it. They saw themselves as going beyond it. So that at death, the ascetic would achieve union with Rudra, who was an early form of Shiva, which was also conceived of the soul rising up to the world of Rudra in the pole star, the Dhruva Loka. So they thought that the pole star, the Dhruva Loka, was the world of Rudra. Now, there's two meanings of that. One is, they meant it metaphorically, it's kind of inner ascent, and the other is that it actually is the pole star. People thought both. Now, this tradition that arose, that followed from it, there's what's called the Lakulisha and Kapalika. They were different. There were other ascetics group that followed from the Pashupatas. The Lakulishas were ascetics that carried a staff and followed a form of Shiva called the Lord who carries a staff. And the Kapalikas you probably heard of. They were skull-bearing ascetics whose modern articulation is in the Agoris, the Agori ascetics in Nepal, who you still see, who my colleague Bjarne Veronica Olsen has done some study of. We take our students every year to Kathmandu for a summer school, and we're always scared that they're going to get eaten by a Kapalika or something, by an Agori. Because they're fairly regular, they have no sense of self-preservation, I don't think. So they all go and hang out with the Agoris in the cremation grounds. Anyway, sorry, the Pashupata ascetic would follow a prescribed path involving stages of living in a temple and worshipping Shiva with dancing and laughter, going out into the world and behaving in antisocial ways that Dan Ingalls here in Harvard noted was similar to ancient Greek cynics and ascetics, and then retiring to a cave, and finally, towards the end of life, dwelling in a cremation ground, meditating upon Rudra, and realizing that all is Rudra. So those are the stages that the ascetic was said to follow. And you've got a quote in your handout there, which is from the Ganakarikas, which is a commentary on that text. And it's interesting, you've just got the... I'll just read it out. You've got the stages here. That's the Pashupata ascetic should live there, in a cave or in an empty house or elsewhere, living from whatever he can find, bereft of fault and without excessive attachment, and so on. Occupying the place is merely the condition of being there in the cave. So the meaning of being there in the cave, because it's commenting on this text, is not knowledge of the place itself, nor as knowledge of the masters, the living tradition, but living with the truth. So it's very interesting. It's what these commentaries do a lot. They reinterpret the text to mean, actually, it's not really a place, it's not really a state, it's the truth that we're living in here and now. So that's what it's doing there. The fourth state is the place of the cremation ground. He should arrive at the cremation ground and understand it well. It is a place not like the cave, but nevertheless, because here the body falls away, this is a special place to remain. Concerning the fifth state, that is the place of Rudra. Rudra is the Lord, the great Lord. Even though previously for the practitioner Rudra was the temple of Rudra, simply designating the place, even so now Rudra is designated as being bereft of body and lacking all spatial limitation. So you get this kind of radical reinterpretation of what the temple is. So the ascetic moves from the temple to the cremation ground, finally to union with Rudra. And this is the fifth ashrama, the fifth stage of life, beyond the Vedic 4 stages. Now this kind of asceticism, one more note on that. The Pashupatas were an incredibly successful group institutionally. They had monasteries and monastic institutions throughout India. And Somnath in Gujarat was a Pashupata temple, which was sacked by Mahmud of Ghazni in 1026, if you may know. And there's always been a puzzle. How come there was such a successful monastic institution with land, grants, patronage from kings, And yet they were doing this. There were these wild ascetics who were behaving in antisocial ways, and finally dying in a cremation ground. And it's a kind of paradox. So I suspect you've got the mainstream. You've got administrators and bureaucrats. You've got the Archbishop of Canterbury's there who are running the show, but you've also got these individual ascetics who are following this practice with varying degrees of seriousness, I suspect. Now, this kind of asceticism forms the background of the Tantric tradition. This is what Tantrism grew out of. These new Shiva communities that developed in the early medieval period are propelled by these ascetic groups. The literature of rules of living for Shiva householders is composed within a Pashupata milieu. And the Nishvasa corpus, which the Nishvasa is the earliest Tantra that we have, Nishvasa Tapa Sanghita, is of householder Tantric Shaivism, which call itself the Mantra Marga. Now, the Nishvasa means the breathing out of Shiva. He breathes out this doctrine or this text. The earliest parts of that text are dated to the 5th century, so it's very, very early. But then most of it's probably 7th. So the Mantra Marga itself is divided into two main textual traditions, this normative Tantric Hinduism, or the Shaiva Siddhanta, and the non-Siddhanta scriptures. And the Netra Tantra that I want to talk about, getting there, the scripture of the eye, along with its cousin the Svachanda, are non-Siddhantika texts. So you've got the Vedic tradition, mainstream Vedic tradition, following rules of Dharma, laws of Manu, revering the Veda as revelation. Then you've got this the ascetic Pashupata tradition, which says it's the 5th stage beyond the Vedic stage. And then coming out of that, you've got the Tantric tradition. Now, that Tantric tradition is divided into two groups of texts. One is the Shaiva Siddhanta, which is dualistic, which means that it believes that God is separate from the self and the world. And the other is non-dualistic, which thinks that there's just a one pure consciousness, that everything is. And it's that side that tends to be transgressive, going against Dharma and going against the orthodox. So that's the kind of just the background picture, as it were. Now, the transgressive side, which seems to be absent in the Netra Tantra. There's a great play, if you're interested in that. There's Jayanta Bhatta was a philosopher, the Nyaya philosopher in the 9th century, who wrote a play, The Agamadambara, Much Ado About Scripture, it's been translated as. And there was a group there called the Blue or the Black Blankets, who he was shocked by because they performed immorally in public places, just wrapped in a blue blanket. And he got this sect banned by Shankaravarman. It's all in the play. So it was obviously an issue at the time, this new religious movement, which was advocating and performing these extreme practices which went against Dharma, which Jayanta saw as undermining the social mores of the time. And we also know about this from King Bhoja, whose daughter wanted to join the Black Blankets. Hi, Dad, I'm going to join the Black Blankets. He says, yes, dear, why don't you bring them round for tea? So she brought round 49 couples, and he had all the men executed and the women banished. So he was looking after his... I'm on Bhoja Deva's side of it, but anyway, that's what he did. Well, we don't know if he did that, but that's what this giant text recalls happening. So it was obviously a live issue at the time, and it probably still is to some extent. Now, apart from being a revelation to Shiva, the Netra Tantra, which doesn't have any of that transgressive material, I've just realized I'm not following my slides. So this this is the Netra Tantra. Let's start over again. So the authorship is unknown, although we do know the name of the copyist from the earliest Nepalese manuscript, Kirti Dara, who names himself in the colophon, which is at the back of your handout, and this is it. This is it. The Netra Tantra is philosophically non-dualist. So any Sanskritist, you can just spend the rest of the time trying to work out what it says. It's philosophically non-dualist or emanationist in its orientation, and was readily absorbed or incorporated into the non-dualist philosophical view that a person, world, and God are a single reality that is consciousness only, chinmaya, only consciousness. And there's a commentary on this text by Kshemaraja, who was a non-dualist philosopher in the 11th century. And so he's pulling the text, he's commenting on it. He sees it's potentially non-dualistic, but he wants to pull it in the direction of his pure non-dualism, really, his goddess-orientated non-dualism. So the text was prestigious at the time for its power to protect from possession and supernatural forces, particularly the ferocious mother goddesses who cause great harm, and much of the text concerns ritual protection and exorcism. But there's also a more theological speculation in one chapter on mystical ascent, the idea that you go up to Shiva through the body. Overall, the scripture presents a universal theological vision as a kind of perennial philosophy, I suppose, that it promotes throughout. This is Amriteshvara from Sringeri. I pulled that off the internet, but the focus of the text is Shiva in the form of the Netra, the eye, or the Lord of Immortality, Amriteshvara, or Amritisha, as it says in the Nepalese version. And that's him from Sringeri. Now, a clear statement about this vision is in the chapter on visualization of Sadashiva. Sadashiva is another important, he was the main god of the Shiva Siddhanta, so he's the main focus of the Shiva Siddhanta, very important deity. And a quote from your text, from the text in your handout: the nature of the supreme reality is colorless, so the pure all-pervading God comprises all the revelations. That's interesting. He is all-pervading, who bestows the total perfection of all mantras. As a pure crystal threaded on a coloured thread always reflects the colour by which the thread is coloured, so God is seen among others, not being coloured by its own nature. So Shiva in himself has no colour, has no nature, but takes on the forms of in which he appears. So you can't articulate a reality independently of the forms of its expression. So it goes on. As the Lord of Gods is expressed in all revelations, he always bestows the fruit for all practitioners. Therefore, the blazing one, that's Shiva, is a stream of tradition. Among all of them, like a wish-fulfilling gem, like that crystal, visualized according to the modes of different natures, he gives the fruit of all the revelations. So this is a clear statement of a kind of universalism, a theological universalism, and inclusivism. We tend to think of these things as much later, but it seems to me this is a clear statement of that very early on, promoted by the Netra Tantra. All revelations and traditions are expressions of the absolute reality, the Paramartha, approached according to different dispositions, bhava vedas, different dispositions. Now, a group of chapters 9 to 13 is concerned with meditation or visualization of the various deity systems. And these chapters are a fine indication of the different sects operating at the time. So if we take the order of the chapters to reflect the order of importance of these groups in 9th, 10th century, then first we have the visualization of Sadashiva, the central deity of the Shiva Siddhanta, with 5 heads. And he's probably more well known to you in the Sadashiva ad Elephanta. This is generally accepted that this is Sadashiva, I think, now. We can only see 3 of his faces. And by whatever practice, which is a distinction of mode of bhava-bheda, he achieves success. Now, that's interesting. That means the term Bhava Bheda seems to indicate your own proclivity, your own who you're attracted to, what kind of god that you like, gentle god, ferocious god, powerful god, goddess, and also seems to indicate the qualities of the deity itself. So this Bhava Bheda, this term Bhava Bheda, Bhava means being or something like that, or Bhava, Bheda, distinction. So what are the distinguishing qualities? What makes you attracted to worship this god, to meditate on Shiva? And it's partly not only the Bhava Bheda of the deity, but your own Bhava Bheda, your own proclivity, your own orientation. What are we to make of all this? What does this scripture tell us about the people who composed it, about their aspirations, about the kind of society and the kind of polity within which it was composed? Sanderson has persuasively argued that the text, at least partly, is a successful attempt to appeal to royalty for the protection of the king and the royal family. But it is also an index of lower social strata as well in its chapters on possession and exorcism and cures for ordinary sickness. So that seems to be one of its motivations. How can you get your kid's got a fever? How can you cure the child in days before we knew about modern medicine and so on? So the mantrin would be employed to cure the child with a mantra. You give the mantra to the child. That still happens today in Kerala anyway. So there was a need to... Chapter 6 then deals with some of this. Chapter 6 and later chapters reflect popular apotropaic ideas and practices. What it calls the gross meditation, the stula dhyanam, points to a world in which ordinary people see a need to protect themselves against supernatural incursion that causes sickness, accidents, and bad luck. So the text is used to ward off the evil eye, the drishti pata. So you read at chapter 19, you quoted there, now I want to hear, this is the goddess speaking, something else she wants to Bhairava to tell, or Shiva to tell her. Now I want to hear the dispelling doubt remaining in my heart, how the mothers, that's the goddesses, are always casting an eye on people, always casting the drishti pata on people. These goddesses are truly innumerable, furnished with immeasurable strength. The yoginis, possessing great strength, force their way through the whole of the shadow. These are the 7 yoginis. Some of them are theriomorphic, half human, half animal, and they're top and tailed by Ganesha and Virabhadra, Shiva in the form of Virabhadra. So these 7 mothers were, if you appease the 7 mothers, each of those has a horde of yoginis underneath them that they're in charge of. So if you appease one of them, the one that's in charge of that particular problem, then that works. So you go to the top. You don't talk to the individual one. You go to the top. So these goddesses come into a person through the shadow, where they are in a liminal of when a person is in a liminal or vulnerable condition, such as sleeping when naked, says the text, laughing too loudly, just having bathed, or children when they won't go to bed when they're being naughty. So they're vulnerable to possession. And an example of a cure is as follows in chapter 6. So having written the name of the person to be protected, the practitioner should worship the Lord, conqueror of death, that's the Lord of the Netra Tantra. The person in question is swiftly snatched from death. Truly, I do not lie. It goes on, the practitioner should offer oblation with white sugar accompanied by sesamum soaked in clarified butter and milk. Sounds like that would kill you, doesn't it? Into a fire with kindling of auspicious wood in a round fire pit surrounded by 3 girdles. That's just a standard Vedic fire pit. With this method, of great protection, one who writes the name should make the offering for the designated person. Then there will be great power for him, even if he has gone to the abode of death. So even if it's too late, you're still helping that person through this ritual. A little further we read, for if a weak man is afflicted by disease, then by simply reciting the name of that person, having inframed it with the root mantra, he will be liberated from his ailments. Whatever mantra, when inframed by the Lord of Immortality mantra, one possessing knowledge should repeat, it will quickly achieve success, even in the case of someone deprived of good fortune. That person with an emaciated body, O goddess, to whom the remedy framed by the mantra is given, he, the strengthened one, will achieve corpulence in an instant, O goddess. So these are practices of framing the person's name by the mantra. So the root mantra, the Netra mantra, is Om Jum Sa, Om Jum Sa. So that's, you frame the person's name, Deva Dattaya, Om Jum Sa, Deva Dattaya, or Namah Deva Dattaya, and then you repeat, then I think you reverse it, Sa Jum Om, rather than, so you frame it that way, I think. But you get the general idea. So you write it. You write the person's name, and you write the mantra around the person's name. You probably give that to them as a cure, but also you as the matron, you as the curer, you as the doctor, will cure the person through repeating the mantra, and in framing their name within it. And so this chapter 6 is mostly about that. Now, we can perhaps glean something of people's lives from this kind of material. To use Weber's term, this is an enchanted cosmos. And these are strategies recorded within the text of people's everyday lives and their hopes and aspirations and the need to avoid the evil eye. Well, I mean, I say it's 7th, 8th century. It's still today. This isn't that long ago. Probably about 20, 30 years, must be about 30 years ago now. I was with my colleague in Kerala, and a lovely young couple had invited us for tea. And the woman had a lovely little baby, and I said, "What a beautiful baby!" And the lady of the house went out, and she got some mud and smeared it over the baby's face, in case I attracted the jealousy of the demons, in case through my foolish, thoughtless comment. It's the biggest faux pas I've ever made. But so, yeah, I mean, so these ideas are still resonant. So the text then points to how the society views itself and even social and gender roles. We know from another text, the Ishana Shiva Guru Deva Padati, which is probably from Kerala, that women are vulnerable to possession and children if they go against social expectations. So when they are in ritual impurity, when they're menstruating, when they're laughing too loudly, and the Ishana Shiva Guru Deva Padati says when standing at a crossroads. Yeah, well, hitching a lift, I don't know. That particular text also says that possession can happen if a person is pretending to be a Brahmin. So if you transgress these social divisions, then you're open to possession. That is transgressing the social boundaries. But the Tantric tradition famously used transgression through which it thought the practitioner could attain supernatural power and liberation, and more mundanely, to challenge social power. So I think that's perhaps underplayed very often, but these texts, some of them, not all, not the Netra Tantra, but others, were challenging social power, I think. But transgressive practices are absent from the Netra Tantra. Well, I say that, but just last week, my friend Bjarne was telling me that Per Kverner has been reading our chapter 7, and he thinks it contains coded language akin to some Buddhist scriptures. So I'd be interested. So perhaps it does. That would make sense because it does claim to be universal. So if it does include that material, that would be interesting. But from what I've discovered, it hasn't got that, but perhaps it does. Anyway, this is in chapter 21 of the Nepalese version. It has a very interesting passage because it theologizes all this possession that it's been talking about and what you do about it, how you cure people, how you get Mary better from her fever, and then it says, the Lord spoke, "Listen, O goddess, I'll tell you a secret, a supreme wonder from the teachings of the Lord for bound souls. Since the malevolent beings desiring to hurt living creatures, since the malevolent beings desire to hurt living creatures, so these beings desire to hurt you, and I'm going to tell you a secret about them," he says to the goddess. Those yoginis, they're called yoginis, those yoginis, bereft of greed and delusion, free from passion and hate, will offer humans to the God of gods for the purpose of sacrifice. Isn't that interesting? They do not harm, being without greed, without desire to harm. They protect the teaching of the God, the great Bhairava. Why are souls created just from the self of the self-created one? Why are souls created? Why does Shiva create the souls anyway? The souls are used for the purpose of sacrifice to the Lord, not otherwise. This is a theologically innovative and interesting happening in this text. In that way, the yoginis free souls from sin. O fair one, for the purpose of grace, the yoginis cut the flood of their bonds. Of the souls used in this way, the soul goes to the highest abode. The yoginis unite the souls to Shiva by the command of Shiva by the three methods. They unite the souls by the supreme, subtle, and gross methods, as they do, and they do not simply kill with their power. So you've got to wait till chapter 20 before you get to the kind of heart of the text, if you like, the secret of the new revelation, that all this talk of possession that it's been concerned with earlier on, it offers a theological interpretation of it, that actually the goddesses are doing you a favor when they possess you and kill you with smallpox or something. They're liberating you because you're becoming a sacrifice to Shiva. And that's so interesting because it also puts sacrifice at the heart of the Tantric tradition in a way. And the richness and semantic density of sacrifice, which I'll talk about a bit in a minute, I think. Other time going, that's okay. So here the text highlights the importance of sacrifice, which I would argue was a central practice at all social levels, and still is in Nepal and some other places. But our text turns it into a soteriology when performed by the yoginis. Indeed, the idea of sacrifice is an all-pervasive in the funeral rites as well, which is the last sacrifice, the antieshti, a theme that persists into the modern world. So this is a general picture. We have a feudal society with the king and ruling aristocracy at the top of the social scale, with ordinary people born into family lineages and castes, practicing the religion of Shiva, and living in, to use Weber's word, an enchanted world, in which they need to protect themselves from supernatural incursion. Alexis Sanderson, in an important article in 1985 now, Purity and Power Among the Brahmins of Kashmir, argued against Marcel Mauss's claim that India did not produce the notion of the individual. According to Sanderson, the Brahmin male is the most individual of individuals on the path of purity, while the Tantric practitioner, by contrast, seeks power, sometimes through the embrace of impurity. The Brahmin male follows dharma, which the extreme tantrics, like the blue blankets that I spoke of earlier, they reject that. The world of male hierarchical purity, which is characterized by observances of permitted and unpermitted food, vegetarian food, no garlic, mushrooms, onions, and so on, along with the prohibition on alcohol, were regarded as inhibition, shankar, by the extreme tantrics, the kulacharas and other groups who wished to transcend that. So that, according to them, the extreme ones that aren't in the nature, I don't think, but maybe Campion is correct, they are there a bit, rejected this idea of the orthodox Brahmin from the laws of Manu, who's worried about possession through coming through his shadow if he hasn't performed his rituals, and is concerned about what he eats and what he doesn't eat. All that inhibits you from realizing the truth of pure consciousness, which is Shiva. You have to transcend that, according to these kulacharas, these extreme tantrics. So this world of purity can be contrasted with the world of female power in a liminal world on the edges of normative Brahmanical practice that challenges that world through worship of female theriomorphic deities, such as the ones you have here, and transgression. Now, none of that is present in the Netra Tantra as far as we can glean. So, by way of summary, then, you've got... This is the kind of cosmic structure in the Netra Tantra. The eternal, you've got the absolute reality described as the eternal. In one place, it's described as the goddess, Lokpata Parameshwari, Shiva, Mrityunjaya, Netratantra, Mrityunjit, various other words. So that's that transcosmic reality. Now that reality becomes articulated as the cosmic order, the levels of the tattvas, the ontic categories, 36 in this scheme, and in the order of beings. You get humans, animals, the text classifies beings that are humans, animals, and plants, and then supernatural agents, and it's got different classifications of these supernatural agents who can attack you. And Netratantra is also manifested in different soteriological functions, in different bhava bedas that you see in the visualization practices of Sadashiva, Bhairava, Krishna as a young man, Buddha, the sun, and the jinna, the Jains. So what does the description of this text that I've just given, that I just presented, show us? What does this show us, this description? There is a sense that the text points to deeper and persistent patterns of social belonging that we might call cultural ontology. I use this phrase to denote what sustains or supports the horizon of intelligibility and familiarity, the horizon of intelligibility and familiarity within which people live. The simple fact that people live in a shared world with each other. I just realised I'm going on a bit. Have I got time to another 10 minutes or so? Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. So the term social ontology is used to denote sociality and comes out of sociology and the idea of social construction, that social forms are constructed through power relationships. By cultural ontology, it seems to me something deeper or more persistent through time, has a kind of temporal depth. And by cultural ontology, I mean forms of life in a society that are shared or collective, and that are required bases for proto-philosophical and philosophical discourse that's built up upon them. So in societies in which such practices that I've just described are normative, here we have a cultural trope that has persisted through generations from earlier times. In reading material on magical rites, possession, and exorcism, we have a sense of accessing both wider and more deeply rooted cultural forms than we encounter in other themes such as mantra or ordinary ritual process. Here, what originates in yogic circles concerned with mantra for soteriological purposes comes to extend itself to all practices, including popular concerns with protection and magical rites, for accomplishing very human ends. Such rites of an autochthonous spirituality, if we might call it that, were perhaps practiced by most of humanity for most of its pre-literate history, perhaps. We can then identify the following themes that we might call elements of a cultural ontology operating in the text. So I've just got a list of 4. Possession by supernatural agents, which Charles Taylor talks about the porous self in that book, Sources of the Self, that a person has porous boundaries, so external forces can come into the self, and you can influence the outside as well. And he contrasts that with the modern self, which he calls buffered, which were self-enclosed individuals, self-enclosed entities. So I think that's interesting, notion of a person as porous. The theme of sacrifice, which seems to be all-pervasive, and is the other side of asceticism. I won't talk about that now, but I think they're two sides of the same coin, because it's the denial of death. So I think this fundamental cultural ontology is the denial of death, or the saying actually death means life. Death can be transformed into life. It's a resolution of that kind of paradox, if you like. And prosperity is a theme, pushti, for human communities through magical practices. And soteriology is a goal that echoes from earlier times. So that's fairly individualistic, because chapter 7 is particularly concerned with that, the yogi who has these this what they call a chakra system in the body, and their consciousness goes up to the crown of the head, which I haven't spoken about, and I won't today. So the universal vision of the Netra is an attempt to appeal to all social levels, from kings to paupers. That's really the point. And to incorporate all the diversity of the different systems within it. So this is an early inclusivism. All traditions are manifestations or aspects of the one reality. Beneath the text, there is a deeper cultural ontology that is sustained through time concerning death and its denial. This is the structure of sacrifice that shows how life is predicated upon death and how immolation is transformed at a subtle level. So I've got a diagram there which just tries to kind of map this idea that immolation, in the sacrificial model, which I haven't really spoken about, immolation is transformed into an invisible offering at a supernatural level. Meditation is transformed into liberation, and visualization, right, is desired end, such as killing an enemy. Actually, I think I missed. I missed actually. There's an interesting. Have you got chapter 18 on your handout? You have. Okay, sorry, I missed out speaking about that. That's interesting, because that's chapter 18 only exists in the Nepalese version. It was edited out of the Kashmiri published edition. And it's a text purely about black magic. So it's all about people wanting to get on in life and wanting to protect themselves against what they perceive to be the evil eye and people doing them down. So chapter 1846, I'll just read this out from this. If you perform this certain kind of ritual to Bhairava, this is what it says. One can make a person mad, or one can even imagine his paralysis, or one may make him mute, or may control them as desired by employing this method. So it's kind of, black magic at a distance. The rite can bring disease, grief, and fear through poisonous fever to other ailments, from piercing pain and arising suffering, as well as from hundreds of various diseases. Whatever one wishes to achieve, so is the effort made. By this method, one may accomplish the goal with poison. By serpents and bandits, through serpents and bandits, the goal will be accomplished in 7 days and 7 nights without doubt. So therefore, the yogi conquers the target through suffering and grief. The target will be distressed with lassitude, afflicted by the loss of kin and sons, along with the loss of his wife, servants, brothers, and children, so he will enter old age. Paul, that's heavy-duty stuff, isn't it? It's saying that a person is defined partly by their relationships, by the family they're born into, the clan, and so on, and that this magic rite will cut all that off. They'll be isolated on their own. Gradually, he becomes languid. Always he sees bad dreams. Sometimes there are thoughts accompanied by great suffering and anxiety. The target, that's the person who you're directing this at, without courage, with the fear of existence through not eating, would experience deprivation, fear of the king, and exile to a foreign country. So that's an example of another example of the material in this text, which was expurgated in the Kashmir version, which is interesting, I've always thought. Now, finally, I'll make some comment about the broader issues on why this text and this material is interesting. The Netra Tantra is interesting because it provides a window into Hindu civilization at a particular point in its development. And we see in it the perennial human concerns about what it is to live a good life, what we can hope for, how we can relate to each other, and how we relate to a transcendent reality. For us, it raises questions relevant to modern concerns about social roles, about illness, about material religion, in the substances that it's concerned with, and about what persists through time. Indeed, the Netra mantra was being used to ward off the COVID virus a few years ago. So Om Jum Sa some yogi was putting it on the website for a small fee, I dare say. So methodologically, my approach to the text has been phenomenological, by which I mean letting be seen that which shows itself, as Frank kindly alluded to earlier. And we see what the text shows itself, and to do that we need philology. So the philological study of primary sources, and preferably go to the manuscript sources if possible. So that's the beginning of the Netra Tantra, Om Namah Shivaya. You can probably make that out. The Om is interesting. It's interesting, like a ooh with a dot. So I would call this a first level phenomenology, but there's a second level phenomenology that raises philosophical questions or even sociological questions about cultural ontology, which I have touched on a bit in the last part of my talk, and how these texts speak to a wider conception of human reality and to comparative religion as well. Through the micro-study of texts, such as this, we can generate models of what we might call Hindu civilization through time, and how we can even see this on a global stage in terms of world systems theory or patterns of human behavior rooted in our evolutionary past. Such wide civilizational patterns are being detected through extensive data banks and digital humanities, such as the project on axial religions at Oxford at the Centre for the Study of Social Cohesion, but that will be a topic for another occasion. So that's me done. Thank you for your attention.
cswr.hds.harvard.edu, copyright 2025, the President and Fellows of Harvard College.